The N64 released in late 1996 in North America, and everyone that got an N64 got Super Mario 64. It was the flagship title for the system, the game that really showcased what the system was capable of. But me personally, I didn't get my N64 until the summer of 1997 for my birthday, so I had to wait a while. So by the time I got my N64, I'd been following a game in Nintendo Power, and this game just looked absolutely amazing to me. It was unlike anything I had ever seen, and that is Turok the Dinosaur Hunter. Now I'm going to be honest with you guys, dinosaurs kick ass. Like, I think they're just so freaking cool. Things like Jurassic Park, absolutely love dinosaurs. So seeing this first-person 3D shooter on the N64 was just absolutely blowing my mind. It looked so realistic at the time. It looked so amazing. And yes, kiddies, the N64 was the premier platform for first-person shooters when it came to consoles. You didn't have this whole thing where Nintendo was the weaker system on the market. The N64 was the strongest system on the market. That's why you got games like Turok and, of course, GoldenEye and Perfect Dark, because that was the system for first-person shooters. But of course, as time has gone on, a lot of these first-person shooters feel very primitive. But Turok the Dinosaur Hunter has been re-released on the Nintendo Switch, and I was very excited for this because as someone who loved Turok as a kid and someone who was just obsessed with the game, I was really looking forward to seeing how this version of the game would stack up. So now Turok has been released on the Nintendo Switch, and I've been checking it out. So what's it all about? Is it a game that you should check out, and is it a worthy upgrade from the N64 version? Sit back, relax, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and let's talk about Turok the Dinosaur Hunter on the Nintendo Switch.
Hey, RGT 85. Hey, Sean.
Oh my god, it's Stevie Richards! So the story of Turok the Dinosaur Hunter is arguably one of the greatest stories of all time, and I'm being very facetious with this. It's a first-person shooter. Who really cares about the story as long as you have a reason to be going out? Basically, there is someone called the Campaigner, and the Campaigner is an evil overlord who's trying to take over the kingdom that Turok lives in by getting this weapon called the Chronospectre. The Chronospectre was basically so powerful that it was broken up into 8 separate pieces. So Turok is trying to get the pieces of the Chronoscepter and put this weapon together and then take out the Campaigner before the Campaigner can get it and then destroy the world that he is in. Now, what's actually interesting about Turok is it didn't necessarily originate on the N64. Acclaim was actually doing a comic book series, and the comic book series was started with Turok the Dinosaur Hunter. So this was sort of to extend the comic book that Turok the Dinosaur Hunter was in and extend the brand of Turok to make him sort of a mainstream character. When you actually got the N64 version of the game, it came with a version of the comic book that was sort of stripped down, but to sort of give you an idea of what the Turok series was all about. So it was rooted in comic books. Now, as far as on the N64 version of Turok the Dinosaur Hunter, at the time, like I said, it was absolutely amazing, but in modern standards, it definitely hasn't aged very well. But upon booting up Turok the Dinosaur Hunter, I was pleasantly surprised. Take a look at some footage of the first level of the game on the Nintendo Switch version versus the N64 version. So looking at the footage between the two different games, you can definitely see that there are some noticeable differences between these versions of the game, and I kind of want to talk about the improvements that were done for Turok on the Nintendo Switch. Obviously, the first thing you're going to notice are the graphics of the game. On Turok on the N64, there was a fog that was used in the game, and this fog was basically used to sort of hide the draw-in distance that was being used for this game, because Iguana Entertainment, who is the company who developed this game, was really pushing the N64 to its limits in terms of a 3D engine that was smooth and a first-person shooter. So in order to sort of supersede this, they included fog into the game to sort of make these draw distances not as noticeable. But on the Switch version of the game, the fog has been really cleared up. The fog is more so used as atmosphere instead of hiding things, and I really was impressed with that. But the main thing is, everything just looks a lot crisper. Everything is obviously a high-definition texture. For the most part, there are some environment pieces that still are a bit low resolution, but the game looks exponentially better. It looks like when you probably played Turok for the first time as a kid, it feels like that. It feels sort of like that first time you played it and, you know, you had this beautiful vision of the game in your head, and unfortunately when you go back and revisit it, it doesn't look anything like that when you had that in your head. It definitely looks like that on the Nintendo Switch. It's like reliving the game for the first time. Another thing that really impressed me about Turok on the Nintendo Switch was just the amount of options that you have in terms of customizing your gameplay experience. Now, obviously, this is the same version of the game that released on the PC on Steam a couple years ago. It's been ported over to the Nintendo Switch by Night Dive Studios, but they included all of the options that you had in those sort of things. You can adjust things like graphical options and your field of depth so that it looks a bit different, or maybe it looks a bit more like the original N64 version of the game. There's different effects that you could turn on and off. You could change the blood as well. And one thing I really like was the addition to change the soundtrack. You can either use the PC version of the soundtrack or the N64 version of the soundtrack. Now, personally, I prefer the N64 version of the soundtrack because that's what I remember playing and that's what I remember growing up with. And it really sounds good. It sounds like they've cleaned up the N64 version of the soundtrack. I have a sound bar and the bass was just really booming on the music and the environmental effects that were going on and the enemies themselves. So I was really impressed with the audio options. Of course, there is the cheats that you can use. They're the exact same cheats for the N64 version, and there's a lot of interesting cheats that were in the original version of the game that really sort of made it stand out and could completely change how the game looks and things like that. So I really enjoyed just the sheer amount of customization options that were available. The Nintendo Switch version of the game also has gyro controls. So if you're a fan of gyro controls like in Splatoon, you can use this in Turok. So really, the options are very robust. I was very impressed with the amount of stuff that you could do as far as customizing your Turok experience. Now, of course, none of this cool stuff would matter if the game played like ass, and honestly, the original Turok on the N64 was definitely an adjustment, as were any first-person shooters on the N64, because the N64 only had one analog stick, so you would look around with the analog stick, but you would actually move with the face C button, so it was very difficult to sort of get used to that, and once you got used to it, it wasn't too bad, but I never really felt like I had precision in the original Turok, or really with any N64 first-person shooter, just because of the way the controller was. Well, this version of Turok adapts both analog sticks, so it feels very, very smooth and very, very fluid. It feels like a modern first-person shooter. Of course, when you're playing Turok, the main thing is you're trying to get different keys to access the different levels in the game. So you're going around these different open areas, taking out different sorts of enemies, from primal people that have spears and different sorts of high-tech weapons, to, of course, dinosaurs and alien-like creatures. One thing I always really liked about Turok was the fact that the different types of creatures would actually battle each other, which, of course, was commonplace on Doom on the PC, but all the console versions of Doom that had came out at the time did not feature this. So as far as I know, this was the first time in a console game where you could see enemies battle each other. Now, one thing that Turok does have as well is platforming, and once again, on the N64, it was kind of hit or miss. Some of the platforming just felt very cheap because of the way the control was working in that game, but in this, it feels absolutely fine. It actually feels almost like a 3D platformer at times with the amount of jumping you'll do, but it feels very smooth. It feels very fluid and very fast. I was very impressed with how modernized the controls felt in this game, and the fact that you can customize things to your liking just makes it even better. There's a whole different variety of weapons that you pick up, some really cool stuff, some really high-tech stuff. The character animations all look great. I always thought it was so cool how you would run up on one of the primal people and shoot them in the neck, and they would hold their neck and blood would just spurt out. It was just so cool at the time, and they really replicated that feeling of the game. Honestly, something like this makes me want an N64 classic, because obviously a lot of the N64 games haven't aged all that well, but if companies are able to do things like this with Turok, with adding in a second analog stick and cleaning up the graphics for some of these games that require things like this, it would be a welcome addition. Like, I think people would absolutely love the end result of an N64 classic if companies were able to do things like this. Turok the Dinosaur Hunter is $20. It is available now on the Nintendo Switch eShop, and honestly, I absolutely love it. The fact that you can play Turok anywhere you go, and it looks so nice and crisp, is just absolutely amazing. When you're playing it in handheld mode, it still looks great. Everything looks nice and crisp, and the gyro controls are still there. You can move the Nintendo Switch in handheld mode to get that gyro feel and aiming, and everything is just so well done. This could have been simply a half-assed project that was put onto the Nintendo Switch, and honestly, that's sort of what I expected this to be. But what we ended up getting is a great revision of the original N64 franchise that is the exact same game, but made for modern stuff. It feels modern, it looks modern, and most importantly, it plays modern. So those are my thoughts on Turok the Dinosaur Hunter. If you ever played it on the N64 and enjoyed it and enjoyed your time with that game, buy this version of the game. If you never played it on the N64, but you want to see what first-person shooters were like from that era, but you don't want to have to deal with the N64 controller and the visual style and the fog and the blurriness, buy this version of the game. It's absolutely fantastic. I'm having an absolute blast with it, and I'll be playing this game for a long time to come. So let me know in the comment section down below what you feel about Turok the Dinosaur Hunter. Did you ever play it as a kid? Do you have any sort of nostalgia nostalgia for it, or will this be your first time playing it? Because honestly, you guys need to play it. It absolutely kicks ass. It's freaking dinosaurs, man. Who doesn't love dinosaurs? And as always, thank you guys for checking out this video. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. Check out other videos on the channel, and as always, I will catch you guys on the next video. Later.